The human body is limited, has its own limitations, yet carries within it a consciousness that is limitless. This packaging of the infinite in the finite is the prime mover for the quest for an individual's learning and development. Science explains, spirituality expands. So will the two ever meet, or are they already walking together hand in hand? We are delighted to have in the studio with us somebody who will not only help us answer that question, but will also widen our understanding of how we see the body, mind and consciousness connection. Referred to by Time magazine as the poet prophet of alternative medicine, he always manages to bring meaning into any conversation about science, spirituality and religion with such eloquence and insight. Please welcome Dr. Deepak Chopra. Dr. Chopra, welcome to our studio.
Thanks, Gaurav.
As always, a delight and a pleasure to have you here with us.
I'm very happy to be here again.
You have this deep passion for actually marrying the two, science and spirituality, and you've seen it grow and evolve over the years. So do you think there is more compatibility and this marriage is going to last?
I think we are coming to a stage where there could be a deeper understanding of consciousness and how it relates to the physical world. The physical world, which includes, of course, our body and our brain, is in space-time. So it has a location in space. Every object, this one, me, you, people watching us, they have a location in space-time. But the consciousness that projects the physical body is presumably not in space-time, because we can't find it. You know, if I go inside your body and look for consciousness in your brain or your body, I can't find it.
Right.
So there are only two conclusions. Either it's a hallucination, it doesn't exist, in which case then the rest of the world is also a hallucination, which some people say it is, Maya. But or it's fundamentally beyond space and time. It transcends space and time, which is what ancient wisdom traditions have always said, that your soul is immortal. It's part of a spirit which is immortal. In the Bhagavad Gita, water cannot wet it, wind cannot dry it, weapons cannot shatter it. It's ancient, it's unborn, it doesn't die. So that means it's transcendent, it's beyond space and time. And that is expressing itself as our mind, as our physical body, and as our intellect, and as our personal identity, which is called our ego, which has a very good kind of basis in Indian Vedantic thought, that we have a physical body, we have a subtle body. The physical body is energy and matter. In Hindi, Ana Maya Kosh and Pran Maya Kosh. The subtle body, which is mind, intellect and ego. And already we're in a realm which gets mysterious, because where's the mind? Where's the ego located? Where is the intellect located? You can't find a specific location for it in the brain, although you can find what are called neural correlates. You can find electrochemical correlates for every thought, for every feeling, for every emotion, for every memory, for every bit of imagination. But neural correlates do not explain how we are having that experience. If I ask you to think of a beautiful sunset and you have an image in consciousness, there's no picture of that in your brain. All you have is a neural correlate. And where is that memory before you have it? Now again, in our wisdom traditions, it's a sanskara. It's not even a memory, it's a potential for memory. And that exists in your soul, if you will, or if you don't like the word soul, in your core consciousness. And then you ask, where is that? And the answer seems to be, it's a wrong question, because as soon as you say where, you imply a location in space-time for something that transcends space-time. Now, this kind of thinking is very alien to the Western mind, because consciousness is a product of the brain, or presumably it is. But then if you ask a scientist, a neuroscientist, how does the brain, which is mostly water, fat, and a few other chemicals, how does it produce thought, feelings, emotions, memory, insight, intuition, inspiration, creativity, free will? And the answer is we don't know. It's called the hard question. I think the reason we don't know the answer is we are asking the wrong question. Instead of saying how does the brain produce consciousness or experience, we should be asking how does consciousness produce the brain and express itself in the physical world.
Right. So we are so limited by our own understanding that we actually can't go beyond that to get the right answer or the true answer.
We are limited by our assumptions. In philosophy there are two things, ontology and epistemology. So ontology means what is the assumption that we start with. And most scientists start with the assumption that this is a physical world, okay, that the essence of reality is physical stuff. But that ontology, that assumption, is kind of falling apart because in the end this is made of molecules. The molecules are atoms, the atoms are particles, and when you go beyond that you end up with nothing. So even though this looks solid, it's actually held together by something that is nothing, and that nothing actually somehow creates the experience of this table or that body. What is that nothing? And now even cosmologists will tell you that the universe comes out of nothing. There are all kinds of theories about it, but a lot of people think that the universe is bubbling out right this moment from something called the quantum vacuum. And the vacuum is beyond space-time. It's bubbling out with subatomic particles. Most of them are colliding with each other and bumping into each other and disappearing back into the vacuum. But what comes out somehow organizes itself as you, me, and the physical universe. And it's not a static thing. It's happening right this moment. So we're at that level. We're disappearing and appearing from the quantum vacuum at the speed of light, or even faster, at this second. Now, again, Vedantic traditions or Indian Kashmir Shaivism or many of the non-dual traditions of the world would call that the Akashic field. And so the Akashic field is both a field, but it's also a consciousness field. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna refers to himself. He says, I am the field and I am the knower of the field. The field is kshetra and the knower is kshetragya. So the field is a consciousness field that interacts with itself and then expresses itself as space-time, energy, information, and matter. In our particular microcosm, that becomes our mind, intellect, ego, physical body, etc.
All right. So this expression of consciousness in this space-time matter world, which we relate to, does it have character, or is it absolute, or does it keep changing?
Consciousness is absolute, but it expresses itself in the relative world, and it expresses itself in a very interesting way. It's self-organizing. So, when a baby is born, the baby is just awareness, that's it. And then the awareness starts to unfold as the baby's mind, the baby's intellect, the baby's individual identity, the body, and it keeps unfolding. And all you have to do is expose that consciousness to an environment, and it'll pick up that environment's and mirror it. So you could have a child that was born in a gutter in Calcutta, but somebody adopts that child in Boston. 25 years later, that child is a professor at Harvard or whatever, and speaks like a Bostonian. So whatever it's exposed to, it picks up, and that is what we call conditioning, and that becomes then the individual mind, the individual identity. But before that, it's just a pure field of possibilities. It's pure creativity. It organizes its own fulfillment. It's self-referral. It has opposing attributes built into it. So mind and body and environment, intellect and ego, or even more than that. It has traits, positive and negative, that makes experience possible.
All right. So then what is the relationship between who we are and our genes?
Well, the genes are the record of all our experiences. but not only our experiences, the experiences of our ancestors as well. And this is actually pretty new, this understanding. The other day I was in New York, and Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist monk, was doing a meditation. He was drawing a circle. He's a calligraphist. So he's drawing a circle, and as he's doing it, he said, I invite my mother to draw the circle with me. Then he said, I invite my father to draw the circle with me. And then he said, I invite all my ancestors to draw the circle with me. And I realized immediately as he was saying this, that our genetic activity is all our ancestors right this moment in every cell of our body. Okay? In every cell of your body, your ancestors and all their accumulated experiences are making it possible for this body to be alive. I couldn't speak without their help on a metaphysical, philosophical level, but it's also literally true. So, a gene, for example, if you go look it up in Wikipedia or the dictionary, a gene is a unit of inheritance. But it's more than that. A gene is a unit that carries the experience of our ancestors, and that includes human ancestors. But if you understand evolution, it goes back to our animal ancestors, chimpanzees, and beyond that, and then ultimately microbes. Again, if we were to use a metaphorical expression for that, you would say the incarnations of Vishnu appearing in our body right this moment. And actually these days we know something which we didn't know even 10 years ago, which is that 90% of our genes are actually in the body. The 90% of the DNA, you might say, is not even human. 90% of our DNA is microbial, which means microbes, bacteria, and they are in our skin, they're in our skin folds, they're in our hair follicles, in our teeth, in our oral cavity, in all the openings of the body, rectum, stomach, intestine. This is 90% of DNA. It's only 3% or so of our body mass, but as information, it's 90%. And this DNA responds to every experience. So if you didn't sleep well last night, then this microbial DNA will be affected. Or if you have a lot of stress and you're producing hormones, stress hormones, microbial DNA will be affected. Or if you're eating toxic food which has a lot of pesticides or chemicals or insecticides, which are basically petroleum products, anything that's manufactured, processed, refined, or artificial, then that disturbs the ecosystem. And this ecosystem is actually the whole planet's ecosystem right here in this moment in our body, and carrying the memory of all of evolution, all our ancestors. So if it gets inflamed, it produces molecules. About 30% of the molecules circulating in our blood are made by this microbiome, as it's called. And they crosstalk with the human DNA. So the human DNA is only 10%, but this crosstalk has only one purpose, actually, to maintain balance, to maintain a state of dynamic non-change, which is self-regulating, and therefore to maintain a state of body, mind, and spirit well-being. But we interfere with it. If we don't sleep well, if we are stressed, if we don't move enough, so things, I think now it's very clear that the most important things we can do is sleep, manage our stress, move, do yoga and pranayama and meditation, eat the right food, and keep the body hydrated. You are actually looking after the ecology of the earth as it has existed for almost 2.5 billion years of time is recorded here.
And also, Dr. Chopra, this is so liberating in thought to know that, we are not limited by our genetic patterns to behave and be a particular thing which has always been. We're creating it all the time by our response to what is around us right now?
Correct. So think of DNA as the alphabet, okay? The English language has 27 letters in its alphabet.
Right.
Hindi has more, actually, if you count all the other consonants and vowels and all that. It gets more complicated. Sanskrit is even more complicated. But DNA is a 4-letter alphabet. There are only 4 letters that code for all of life. And you can refer to them as A, T, C, and G, which stands for 4 bases: adenine, cytosine, thymine, guanine. But A, T, C, and G. So whether it's a banana or a potato or a mouse or an insect or a honeybee or a tree or you, these are the 4 letters. That's it. But then, of course, there are words. You can use these 4 letters to make words. The word is a gene. A gene is a unit of letters, a sequence of letters that codes for a protein, which then, of course, creates the body. And then these proteins are enzymes that influence and ultimately result in fats and not only sugars and everything. The whole body chemistry ultimately comes from these 4 letters. And the genes are the words. But your body is not just words. It's sentences, paragraphs, chapters, stories, and a whole epic.
True.
So, this is I would say the easiest way to explain this is it's personal, collective, ancestral, animal, and microbial karma. Every experience that life has had since the beginning of life on this planet. Now we don't know what is happening elsewhere.
Right. And I think that's where this whole lens which you're changing, and they say that when you change the way you look at things, then the things you look at change.
Change, yes. Epigenetics is a completely new science now.
Okay.
So until 10 years ago, there was only genetics. Epigenetics means the environment around the genes influences the on-off switches of the genes. So you don't actually change your DNA. You don't actually change your genes. What you change is the on-off switches. And those switches are influenced by thoughts, by feelings or emotions, by the way we speak, because what we say reflects what we're thinking and feeling, by our behavioral choices, by our social interactions, by our personal relationships, and by everything that we call experience: eating, breathing, digestion, metabolism, elimination, the world we're experiencing through our 5 senses, and then our inner world of thoughts and emotions. All of that is switching them on and switching them off. And what we are learning is you can switch on the good ones, so you could say upgrading the genetic expression, and switch off the bad ones that cause inflammation, heart disease, autoimmune illnesses. It turns out that only 5% of only 5% of disease-related gene mutations are fully penetrant, which means you inherit something that can't be stopped, okay, so far as we know, at the moment, with all the knowledge we have. These are fully penetrant. So, Angelina Jolie had a breast cancer that had one of those genes. That's why she had to have a mastectomy, double mastectomy, to prevent that. There are certain types of Alzheimer's, not all, only about 3 or 4% of Alzheimer's, that have fully penetrant genes. But once you understand that, Down syndrome is a fully penetrant gene, Once you understand that, you realize that 95% of disease-related gene mutations are influenced by lifestyle, by the choices we make every day. So diabetes, which is such a common disease in India, the vast majority of diabetes is not only preventable, There are now a few cases of diabetes which are due to insulin deficiency. So the gene wasn't there, or whatever, or it was destroyed, its expression was destroyed because of an autoimmune illness, a virus or something. But the vast majority of diabetics in India, for example, or in the world, are related to what is called insulin resistance, and related to obesity, also called metabolic syndrome. The major cause of kidney disease, blindness, heart disease, strokes, and all the other morbidities that occur with diabetes, not only preventable, they are curable. So we know heart disease is curable. We are now beginning to realize that a lot of chronic illnesses are curable, but not through drugs, through choices that we make every day.
I think your center is also doing, the first of its kind clinical trials on the holistic or the whole approach to health.
Yes, about 2 years ago, we invited a team of scientists from the University of California, San Francisco, to examine the enzyme telomerase in the blood of people who are coming to one of our courses. It's called Seduction of Spirit. It's a very intense course of meditation that goes over several days. Telomerase is the enzyme that controls the length of telomeres, which are like little buttons at the end of chromosomes. So think of your shoelaces, if you wear shoelaces,
okay,
and at the end of the shoelace there's a hard part.
Right.
Okay, so that would be called a telomere, and the rest of the shoelace is your chromosome, which houses the genes. As we grow old, this hard part, the telomere, it starts to weaken, it starts to get shorter, it starts to fray. And once it frays to a certain extent, then the whole chromosome falls apart and the person dies at the cellular level.
Okay.
This is the molecular basis of cellular death. Telomerase is an enzyme that influences the length of the telomere. So if the enzyme goes up, then the telomere stays healthy and doesn't shorten at the rate it does with aging. So what happened was very surprising. In 4 days of intense meditation and nothing else, no other significant intervention, the level of the telomerase in people who were coming to this intense meditation course went up by 40%. 40%.
Wow.
4 days. So we were surprised, so were the investigators. Fortunately, we had saved the blood samples, and so we sent them to other collaborators at Harvard, at Mount Sinai in New York, UCSD and Scripps and other places. And we asked our collaborators to look at the entire genome, because some people look only at gene expression, some people look at proteins, and to make a long story short, they found that the entire genome changes when people meditate. Now, why is that? I think my guess is that when your mind gets very silent and gets close to core consciousness, because core consciousness is self-regulating, self-organizing, self-evolving, self-expressing, self-referred, you're basically reaching your baseline state like a child was. And so everything kicks in, self-repair, etc., etc. But the fact that the entire genome is changing, the good genes are being upregulated, that means the ones that cause self-repair, and the genes that cause inflammation are being downregulated. This we've already found just with meditation. So we said the next study should include not only meditation but yoga, pranayam, because there are 108 pranayam techniques and they all have different effects on the body, but also other interventions. So in classic Ayurvedic traditions, when a person went for something called panchakarma, they had a week of something called purva karma. Purva karma was that they went on a light diet, they swallowed some oils, which we use now, primrose oil, olive oil, sesame oil, flaxseed oil, And they also take high fiber, plant-based fiber, and for 1 week they eat less.
Okay.
Then when they come to the center, they have a week where they go into meditation, do yoga, pranayama, maintain the diet, which is mostly plant-based. There's no meat in the diet, and it's organic. It comes from farm to table. And they also continue taking these oils. But in addition, they take what we would call adaptogens. But in India, there are things like tulsi and fenugreek, methi, and ashwagandha and shatavari and triphala, and very standard plant-based, not bhasmas or anything, plant-based things. We have now found that these plant-based herbal preparations, if lack of a better word, are called adaptogens. They help the body adapt to stress. Now, what we also do during this week is people get massage with, again, those same oils. But we started to realize is because 90% of the microbiome is in our skin, in our gut, by introducing these interventions, including the massage, including the steam, including the diet, including the herbs and the adaptogens, and then adding yoga and meditation, we're actually directing the entire genome, in not only the human genome, but the microbial genome with crosstalks, to actually create a new body. Now, if you read Sushrut and Charat, they had something called Kaya Kalpa,
right,
where you went for 6 months into isolation and you actually practiced all this, and you would come out much younger.
right.
So the tradition says. We think there's a scientific basis for that you can actually show that the biological markers of aging, which are not only just things like blood pressure and bone density, skin thickness, number of wrinkles, immune function, hormones, those are good. But you can go to a cellular level now and study telomerase, telomeres, cytokines, which are cellular markers of aging and inflammation. And you can document at a cellular level that aging is not only being retarded, but some of these biological markers are reversing. Now, how much they reverse is a question. But I sincerely believe now, based on the data, that your biological age can be 20 or 30 years younger than your chronological age, which means you could be chronologically 60, but your biology represents somebody who's 40. That. But we are now creating the science for this, and this is called Self-Directed Biological Transformation Initiative, the acronym SBTI for short. And we have 7 institutions involved, all major institutions: Duke University, Harvard, Mount Sinai, the California Institutes, and also Scripps, where we can do digital monitoring of heart health and brain health. So these days they have biosensors about the size of a Band-Aid, which you stick here and here. Your iPhone or Android will pick up information about your heart, electrical information about your heart and brain, transmit it to a supercomputer and give you an instant readout. So combining digital technology, genome analysis, cellular biology, we are creating, I think, the basis of a consciousness-based understanding of biology. It's never been done before in the East or the West, although these practices are there. But we are reviving the practices, but we are also creating the science for this.
So, Dr. Chopra, when we talk about science today, moving towards validating all that which did exist somewhere in the world, in some civilization, and getting the right language to say the right words which appeal to the West and to the East, then the role of God, because God has always lived in the realm where we say, okay, we don't understand, but there is God. And you also write about that.
God is a very interesting word, because as soon as you say the word God, then people have ideas about God. So, there's a Christian God, there's a Jewish God, there's a Muslim God, etc., etc.
Right.
As soon as you use the word God, you create an idea, and any idea of God couldn't be God, because then it's limiting something that by definition is infinite. So as soon as you label it, and that unfortunately that's the only label we have for an infinite transcendent consciousness that expresses itself as the world of energy, information, space-time and matter. That's why I'm writing a new book right now. It's called The Future of God, which is a deeper understanding of consciousness as fundamental in the universe. So consciousness is more fundamental than space and time. And space-time and everything, all the forces of nature come from that infinite consciousness. That would be God. But we have to transcend all religious ideas about God then. Religious symbols of God are just that, symbols. So, in India we have hundreds of gods and goddesses. They're symbolic expressions of states of consciousness that we imagine in order to make sense of the infinite. And that, by the way, is very consistent with the teaching of Adi Shankara and many of the great teachers that have existed, including the great rishis of the Upanishads who spoke about non-dual consciousness. And it's okay because it's not easy for the human mind to grasp the infinite or the ineffable, to create an image, and then the image at least gives you a relationship to the infinite. And in other traditions too, Allah doesn't have any image, or Yahweh doesn't have any image. If there is an image, then it is a symbolic expression of the infinite, which allows you to have a relationship with that. But if you go into, again, in Kashmir Shaivism or any of the non-dual traditions, or the teachings of Adi Shankara or Khmer Raja, or any of the, even the more in-depth understanding of Buddhist and Jain traditions, then Atman is Brahman. So which means that the ground of the individual is the ground of the universe. After all, there's only one root, and then from that one root springs everything. I think we are coming to that conclusion. Now, having said that, there are a lot of materialist scientists who would say totally dismiss this, because they have a different ontology, which means they have a different basic assumption of reality. You have to start with an assumption. Is the world material or is the world non-material? If the world is material, then how does it produce consciousness? That's called the hard problem. We don't know. But if the world is non-material and it is consciousness to begin with, then everything as an experience in consciousness, mind, matter, and the universe, then we have a solution to the hard problem. The other branch of, philosophy, which scientists don't really understand, and it's unfortunate because a lot of modern scientists are very illiterate as far as the limitations of human knowledge are concerned. So the other branch of philosophy is called epistemology, which says, how do we know what we know? What is the capacity of the human nervous system even to know? And there are other people, from mathematicians like Alfred Korzybski and many others, who say by the time information gets to your brain, there are many levels of abstraction. Let's say I'm looking at you, or I'm looking at an object. First of all that's coming to my eyes is colorless photons. They hit my retina. There's a chemical reaction. Some of the information is abstracted, and then that chemical reaction sets off an electrical current. Some more is abstracted. By the time information gets to your brain, there are 5 levels of editing or abstraction. So what I see is a minute segment of what actually exists out there. Furthermore, what I see is unexplainable, because what's going to my brain is an electrical current. How do I experience the 3-dimensional world in space-time? Don't know. So, both epistemology and ontology suggest that what we call scientific knowledge is very limited. It's a protocol that's very limited. Even what we call empirical evidence is a very species-specific mode of observation through a human nervous system. The universe is much bigger than that.
When you talk of the universe, you also believe that the universe cannot be one random act of different creations coming together. There is a method in this madness?
The universe that we see requires what are called cosmological constants, which means very precise laws of mathematics, and besides that, precise numbers and ratios of numbers. So the ratio of the electromagnetic force to gravity, etc. There are many numbers, and there are at least 30 or 40 that have to be very precise in order for you and me to have this conversation.
So they exhibit themselves at different levels, the same ratios?
The same ratios produce what are called regularities, and which we call the laws of nature. So, you know, every scientist will acknowledge that the laws of nature are there, and if they weren't there, we wouldn't be able to do science, and we wouldn't have a universe. But where did those laws come from? Why are the laws of nature there? That's not a question that science deals with. That's a question we cannot answer. Okay, it's a cop-out in many ways. So right now in cosmology, there are two theories. One is the universe is so precisely orchestrated and mathematically orchestrated that even a decimal point off and we won't have a universe. So this is called the anthropic principle. There's a weak anthropic principle, strong anthropic principle, but the fact is the universe was specifically designed for life.
Okay.
By whom, whatever, we can choose the word God if we want, infinite consciousness, unified field, whatever, Brahman.
Okay.
The other theory right now is that there are multiple universes and there are infinite universes, and they are due to a process called eternal inflation, which is very complicated. I won't go into it. But we are the one that hit the jackpot. So this is the one that is, you know, if you have infinite universes, there's an infinite number of possibilities that one of them will hit the jackpot. And so we won the lottery, and there's no need to invoke God. So Stephen Hawking and many others belong to this school of thought. Okay. And again, that's a cop-out, because infinite universes, if they even exist, they are non-observable. They probably have different laws of nature, and therefore to propose them is a metaphysical proposition and not a scientific proposition. But people like Stephen Hawking and many others get away with it because they have reputations that they are great scientists. And you know, they are great scientists, but they have no business actually proposing things that make no sense whatsoever from a scientific point of view. That's my contention with them.
Dr. Chopra, you were a being of consciousness, then you became a man of science, you became a medical doctor, and yet there was something which wanted to take you beyond what you knew, ask the questions. And we all have this somewhere within us, but you know, we kind of put it aside and go on to the path which our external environment says, this is the path for you, this is your career, go on. You moved beyond. How did that happen?
I really can't tell you how that happened. I think it happens due to chance, due to coincidence, due to synchronicities, but always because there's a burning question. And the burning question for me has always been, what is existence? Why is there existence? And then how come we are aware that there is existence? How come we have the consciousness to know there is existence? These questions have been with me ever since I was a child. I went to medical school, you know, to understand life, and they've always been there. Fortunately, I met some very wonderful people. I was inspired by a lot of people, J. Krishnamurti, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and then, you know, now I belong to certain societies. There's something called the Society for Consciousness Studies, which has a lot of philosophers and scientists. There's another society called Non-Duality in Consciousness. There are societies of physicists and mathematicians who are interested in consciousness. So we dialogue together on the internet, kind of in
It's a community.
communities,
Yeah, okay.
and we learn from each other. Having said that, I don't want to give the impression that what I've said today is entirely mainstream. A lot of scientists, including some very prominent scientists in the world, people like Stephen Hawking, radical materialists like Richard Dawkins, they would take exception to everything I've said. In fact, they would say it's total nonsense. They're slowly having to possibly change their minds because they can't answer the hard questions, and there is no science for those hard questions. And they also have very little knowledge of ontology and epistemology, as I said before. So we are a growing group, I would say, of thinkers, philosophers, scientists, and just people who are kind of out of the box. What has happened in the last 10 years, though, is both epigenetics and what we call neuroplasticity, which means you can really change the wiring of your brain through consciousness. These two sciences are becoming hardcore sciences that produce results that are publishable. This is our window of opportunity to create a consciousness-based paradigm.
For scientists and philosophers at a deeper level, the quality to be objective, to see what you're talking about and believing in, and yet have that little sakshi approach, the witness approach, that is very critical. You managed to do that. How difficult is it?
It's not difficult if you have a regular practice of what we call sadhana. I spend 2 hours every day in deep meditation, which includes traditional practices like dhyan, dharana, samadhi, vipassana, but vipassana at many levels: sensations, images, feelings, thoughts, relationships, interior space, and so on. I practice yoga every day and breathing techniques every day. So that's very much a part of my life. In the last decade or so, I've also started practicing a deep form of yoga nidra, which means I introduced the idea of witnessing awareness, sakshi, whatever you want to call it, in deep sleep and dreams. And I started to realize that what people call the subconscious mind is actually the non-local, transcendent, cosmic mind which never sleeps. And that yoga, traditional, good, hardcore understanding of yoga, is to allow you to awaken to the mind that never sleeps. And that whether it's yoga nidra, whether it's dhyan, dharana, samadhi, whether it's vipassana, whether it is contemplative self-reflection or transcendence, they actually help you awaken to the mind that never sleeps, the cosmic mind, the non-local mind. I think subconscious is a terrible word because it's the most conscious. Sri Aurobindo called it the supraconscious.
True. Very true. But when we are, somewhere we link objectivity and witness to lack of passion, lack of caring, uninvolvement, is there a conflict?
If that lack of involvement takes you out of the melodrama of everyday existence, then I think it's great. Because I think everybody is too dramatic, and the melodrama mostly is leading to conflict in the world through religious strife, to ethnocentrism, to racism, to mechanized death and eco-destruction. So we've made a mess of the world because of what we call reality. It's not reality, it's a projected reality which comes from not being connected to your source. I think you can have passion and detachment at the same time, and true passion is the awakening of these dormant potentials that exist within all of us. And then you can in a sense have your cake and eat it. You can be very passionately involved, and you can also know that there's nothing you can hold on to because what you're trying to hold on to is an abstraction. There's nothing to hold on to. Nothing stays static. It's constantly on the move, and what's on the move is not a physical thing. It's an activity of the whole cosmos.
As you like to say, there's nothing which is a noun. Everything is a verb.
Is a verb.
Absolutely.
So the one who's holding on is a verb, and that which is being held on is also a verb.
At a personal level, what gives you sadness and what gives you joy?
I don't have highs and lows at the moment, but I do feel joy just in the state of being, and I do feel joy when I'm especially with my grandchildren.
Lovely. So is it about the sheer openness and the innocence of the child which is so pulling?
I think once you let go of all ideas, including the ones that I've been talking to you about,
Right.
then there is that experience of joy. You know, Rumi has a beautiful poem where he says, beyond all ideas of right and wrong, there's a field, I'll meet you there.
Lovely. This is so beautiful. And I think sometimes in the course of that conversation, you also, Dr. Chopra, take us to a particular field where we meet ourselves, I think, beyond ourselves. To go beyond is something which we have the capacity, but we are seldom provoked, inspired, or moved to doing that. And you managed to do that so beautifully.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was brilliant talking with you.
Thank you very much.